Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at ConTinual. I'm your host, Gail Martin, and tonight we're going to be talking about the legends and lore and mythology of Supernatural. 15 seasons, there's a whole lot of that going on. And right now I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves. Michelle, kick us off.
Hi, I'm Michi Crowley. I'm a lecturer at Northern Kentucky University, and I teach popular culture and public speaking and all sorts of geeky, fun stuff.
Great. And Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and editor. I've got stories out in a couple of anthologies. The most recent one is in Alternate Peace, edited by Stephen Silver and Joshua Parmentier.
Terrific. And I'm Gail Z. Martin. I'm Morgan Bryce. As Gail Z. Martin, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, steampunk, and more. And as Morgan Bryce, I write urban fantasy, male, paranormal, romance. But the big thing is we are all huge Supernatural fans, and we're here to talk about all that good stuff about where the writers got their ideas. So let's start with all those creepy cryptids, all those creatures that the Winchesters hunt. They all had to come from somewhere, and the rule was that the writers weren't allowed to make them up completely. They had to be based on something you could Google. So, what are some of the favorite creatures, and how did that lore work out for them? Michelle?
Well, the first one that pops to mind is the Jersey Devil. Even though we never actually have a Jersey Devil, it's more the the idea. It's the episode where, sorry, spoilers, Bobby gets shot, and it's they're looking for this creepy thing that's in the woods, and I guess it's probably New Jersey, and come to find out that it's just people that have been mutated because of the Leviathans.
Awesome. Well, let's take a pause here. Amy was able to join us. Amy, tell us who you are, and we're talking about the legends and lore behind the cryptids in Supernatural right now. So let us know who you are.
Well, hi everyone. Nice to meet those of you I haven't met before. I'm Amy McNeil. I am the senior content manager for a tech company, and I have also co-owned a comic book store with my husband for more than 20 years in Washington, D.C. I am a history buff and obviously an enormous Supernatural fan, as you can see behind me in my supernaturally appointed faux bunker office. So I'm definitely interested in this conversation. There are so many of the comic book references that are in Supernatural are in fact push-throughs to legends and lore, a lot of it based through the DC Vertigo, Neil Gaiman kind of world there. There's even one point where you see Death reading a Death comic, which is very interesting. So the different cryptids and stuff that are involved. I know you were mentioning what was supposedly the Jersey Devil a few seconds ago, which is an old favorite in the area. I personally live in Maryland, where our particular cryptids are Black Aggie, Chessie, the Chesapeake Bay sea monster, and the Goat Man. And also the Blair Witch Project movie was set here, although that has nothing to do with legends and lore for my state. It's just some shit people made up. So.
Yeah, but Supernatural kind of hearkened it in several episodes where they did that kind of camera, the one I call the nausea camera, but yeah. I think it's got a more official name.
The shaky
cam.
Yeah. I also have motion sickness, so I find it to be extremely disturbing.
Yeah, but it's a technique. Elektra, how about you on
Well, I really like what they did with their version of vampires and werewolves and the idea of the alpha.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think one of my favorite bits is when Dean goes looking for a vampire in a bar, and he finds a guy wearing glitter. Hey, well, it works getting the chicks.
Right.
But the idea of the
Thanks, Twilight.
the prime alpha that they're looking for, and if we can get these guys and kill them, that'll kill off all the vampires.
And I love the way that building on that, they put together in several different ways, taking popular vampire mythos stuff and kind of squishing it together. One thing that always appeals to me, and it definitely becomes important during the Benny storyline after Dean comes back from, from purgatory, is it always was interesting to me that Supernatural didn't do a whole lot of episodes and stuff in New Orleans, which is, legendarily a place that's very spooky and full of stuff, and full of
the architecture in Vancouver.
Yeah, full of the kind of knowledge, things that they would do. And I'm sure that was a reason for it. It's very hard to simulate New Orleans, but I love the fact that they went into it there using the logic that New Orleans is super screwy and full of stuff, and everybody knows that. So as long as it stays in New Orleans, nobody really bothers, engaging in too much work in that direction because it's really not fixable, which I thought was great because it very much builds on the local mythos of New Orleans to do that,
And they came up with their own version of the local mythos.
Yeah.
They had their version of the Thin Man or the Slender Man.
Yeah, Slender Man.
And then the kids who just built out one of the local houses and filled it up with writings in the basement that came from all sorts of different things, and they took one look at it and says, wait, this don't make any sense. It's not all from the same, it's not Enochian, and it's not this, and it's not that. It doesn't fit together. What's going on?
It's the Blue Oyster Cult.
Yeah, that's what makes Tulpa so interesting, because it's just the same thing that legends and lore, IRL are. Like, it's all stuff that if you get enough people to believe in the gnomes that live under the mushrooms outside, then it does take on a life of its own and develops into something that is carried down multi-generationally, So the idea of a tulpa in that direction is not only very powerful, it's a very good explainer for a lot of, things that they encounter throughout the series that aren't necessarily in the lore.
Mm-hmm.
There are new things being created all the time through this, if enough people believe it, it's true.
I thought one of the interesting ones that they kind of put their own spin on were the wraiths, because
I love that.
Like, you have the wraiths with that nice little stabby thing coming out of their wrist, really creepy, but very different from the traditional wraith, which is more or less a type of restless, vengeful ghost, as opposed to a corporeal creature that shivs you with, their own little wrist claw.
Yeah. Monster Manual wraiths are more like a ghost that is a little souped up, a little angrier, and maybe it has a little bonus power due to either the way it became a ghost or, what the creature was, what that person was in life before they became a wraith. So I found it really interesting for them to make that differentiation, because I can see that it would be hard for civilians, people who are not nerds, to make that distinction between, well, what's the difference between a ghost and a wraith? They're like the same thing,
One of the things they do that is absolutely fabulous is, like with Benny, they don't say werewolves are bad or vampires are bad. Some of them are shades of gray. I won't say that Benny was a good vampire, but Benny was at least, friends with Dean for some definition of friend.
Regardless of how anyone feels about Anne Rice, you are totally right on that, because that builds right out of the Lestat mythos, where these vampires, they live in town, they're going to the cafe down the street, they know people, they have barbers and maids and, places they go living normal lives, not just like Dracula into a crypt full of bats in the night, So I think that's been really powerful. It helps create the perception for people that are watching it and for people that are in the show that this is just a half step outside of your reality. And if you just open your eyes, you'll see it.
Well, and I think it took Dean a while to get to that point of saying that not all werewolves, not all vampires were bad. And of course, part of it was getting over his own brother and being able to accept Sam and coming to terms there. And then both of them have had their time over the years being monsters themselves in one way or the other. So
their relationship with Castiel was very important in determining to them that not every non-human creature is an enemy or should be considered that way. Because, you know, with Cass becoming a part of their lives and a part of the team, they had to, you know, that really caused some long-term adjustment in the way that both of them were going to look at things, especially Dean. You know, as the relationship developed, he learned that the world was a bigger place than he thought it was growing up.
Yeah. I mean, Crowley, the same way. Crowley was always a frenemy, but still ended up more of a friend and sacrificed himself for them. Rowena, the same way. Even Meg, you know, ended up doing them some good turns.
That follows the journey that people take to adulthood in a lot of ways, where you have to learn that the world is not the black and white place that you thought it was when you were 12 or 16 or 18. You know, as you get older, you know, you learn those things, and Dean really goes on that journey as a character. I've always felt that Dean got way more character development than Sam has over the course of this series. You know, that's very much me, because Dean's mindset has changed so dramatically that indicates a lot of mental growth, and his relationship and attitude towards monsters and legends and things of that nature has definitely illustrated that growth.
How about you, Michelle? Yeah, I see you thinking.
Yeah. Amy, maybe it's going to be a panel at a later date that we would have to debate Sam versus Dean growth, or, you know, just look at that. That would be a fun panel.
I would argue for Dean.
For it, yeah.
I'm here to argue for Dean.
I'm very much on the Sam side, so we'll argue that out. But yeah, like one of the things that I always have a notebook with me when I do these sorts of things, and when you said that the idea of the tulpa creates the lore, and that's kind of like the writer's out. It's like, okay, yeah, so we have this idea, but we can screw with it and mess with it, because within the mythos of the show, we can say that, you know, this is what the people in the show believe. It may or may not be, you know, congruent with what's going on in the outside world, kind of like with the vampires and the glitter. You know, at that time, of course.
Exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, you and I are right on the same page with that, because it gives the writers an opportunity. I mean, I create content for a living. I write 40 hours a week. And unlike, you know, you guys, many of you guys write fiction, I am a nonfiction writer. I am a content creator. I write for a tech company. So I am a terrible fiction writer, but I'm good at what I do in advertising and content creation and curation. And you always need to have that ability to transform a situation into something that is going to be beneficial to you in advertising. And that is very much something that is done in Supernatural as well, through the tulpas and the way that they deal with modern legends. The writers are given an opportunity to transform anything that they happen to come across into something that they can use as fodder for the show, because mythology is only going to go on for so long, and over 15 seasons they haven't hit everything, but they've definitely hit the highlights more than once. You know?
The other thing that gives them some of that play is there's no official version of myths.
Yes.
You know, there are so many cultures over so many millennia in so many places that have put their own spin on these stories, that whose official version are you going to pick? You know, they're all official and they're all not official. So the show has some definite leeway there.
Isn't it beautiful the way that they put that together, Gail, so that they go through, so when they're studying up on something and how to kill it or what they need to know about it, instead of going for one particular mythos when they're determining what it's about, they, you know, really grab up all the stories, the lore from everywhere, and then kind of congeal them into one thing and be like, okay, let's give this a go. This looked like it appeared 3 times. Like, kind of like you're doing a real journalism, you know, like you're doing a real story on somebody. Like, this must be the truth. 6 different people are saying it.
Well, and that's also how a lot of cultural myths come about, because you have these different groups of people that are coming together, and they all kind of have the same story with the same lesson, even though there's like different characters involved, and maybe it's it's Hansel and Gretel out in the woods, or maybe it's two other, I don't know, insert other cultural story here. But I mean, that's really what ends up happening in our real life, is that especially as Americans, our cultural stories are this big melting pot of everybody else's stories.
Yeah, how many of us still throw salt over our shoulders when they, just for that? I mean, and a lot of us who grew up, my family's Irish Catholic by ethnicity. So it's like world of weird myths combined with religion that have distilled into various, not putting new shoes on the table, throwing salt over your shoulder, banging pots on New Year's Eve, all of those things. And that's what makes it so easy, I think, for us as viewers and for the writers to communicate that one step outside of normal life, is that we all, even if we're not conscious of it, we all in the back of our minds have those things. We all have those little superstitions and predispositions and things that you see something on the show and you're like, okay, that's believable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, remember, these guys started, the show started really small, and all knowledgefulness came from Dad's book.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just look it up in Dad's book. Dad ran into one of those once in Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
And then they expanded from that. And now we're in season 15, and they've got the whole bunker.
Yeah.
And they've expanded where they're willing to look.
Definitely.
I mean, there's one pivotal episode where they're trying to figure out who made these people disappear. The sheriff's brother.
Oh, yeah.
And Sam goes missing, and what kind of monster are we after? And they finally look at it. You're just a guy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for a monster, and you're just people.
The Benders. That episode is The Benders. It is one of the creepiest possible episodes I've seen of the show, because typically as you go through, there's some weird thing that you're stabbing with an ash stake dipped in apple juice boiled on the last full moon or whatever. This is just people, and you can't get past that. And to speak to your point there, Elektra, Ben Edlund and Eric Kripke are both heavily influenced by comics. Ben Edlund is one of the owners of New England Comics, which is not only one of the oldest comic shops around, but also created the Tick. So he has definitely steeped himself deep in the mythos of Vertigo Comics and the way that, that independent comics draw on those kind of fairy tale horror kind of stories. And it's really obvious, and it's super cool, because it's a creative yet approachable way to do it.
Yeah. And that's, that is its own body of lore. One of the things I love about Supernatural is that the lore also includes really the body of pop culture, because there are so many references to so many things. And somebody mentioned the Blue Oyster Cult symbol. Well, yeah, that's its own whole story. So a lot of times when we talk about legends and lore, we're talking about the creatures of magic or, the languages, but that pop culture is also a mythos in what the songs represent or what the settings represent.
Our modern mythos that includes things like the Avengers and Star Wars and even Supernatural, which is part of our modern mythos.
And the Rudy Hobbit. The Rudy Hobbit gets a pass.
Yeah, exactly. But all of those,
like Elsa, just let it go.
Yeah, all of those things are in there. You see, I remember Dean's going to go into a gate to hell, and Billy is standing in front of it, and it's like in the back of this weird shop, and she is reading a comic book called Death, the Time of Our Lives, while she is standing there at the table. And that just every time, that cracks me up every time I see it. And they're all making all the various Gen X references that the boys are making all the time. I didn't even really understand until I watched it with someone who was much younger than me, how you have to explain certain things like moose and squirrel. They had never heard of Bullwinkle before, had no idea what any of that stuff was. She had to Google it to figure out what it was about, and had still never seen an episode. And I was just like, I couldn't compute not having watched Scooby-Doo on the TV with the dial in the afternoon. It was just very strange.
Well, I think one of the things that Supernatural does, and I think it's very smart, and I think it creates a lot of engagement with its viewers, is throwing those references out, whether it is a monster reference or angels or demons or whatever, and trusting us to get it.
Yeah.
And this really occurred to me at DragonCon a couple of years ago, the tremendous amount of shared cultural knowledge that you have to have in your brain to walk through a convention like that, or Comic-Con or something like that, and know who all the people are dressed up as, and get the joke when there's a funny button or a sign, and when people mash things together. There's a huge amount of acquired knowledge.
Yeah, from cosplay. I saw a group of people at DragonCon the last time I went. Sad silent moment for DragonCon this year. That were doing the Avengers, but all done as fast food characters. So it was the Avengers, but like instead of Captain America, it was Captain Kentucky Fried Chicken. Like, the way that and it was just so funny. But as you were saying, you need to have all of those, check boxes to fire as soon as you look at that in your brain to say, oh yeah, ha ha ha, both Colonel Sanders is now Captain Chicken, and I understand what the chicken bug and the red and white and the weird, and all of that come from. And we
know he's really as Asmodeus, but
and it's something that happens on Supernatural all the time, because in the same conversation, they will make, in one conversation, the Impala, there will be 3 Star Wars jokes, 2 I told you so's, something about a song, and like 3 and a cat butt. I was hoping I would not cat butt you guys.
We have a cat sighting. So
and it's always say hello.
Period.
Angels and demons. So everybody thinks, they went to catechism, they went to Sunday school, whatever, they had this angels and demons thing in their head. I know I was scrolling through Pinterest one year around Easter time, and a lot of the saints pictures came up, and I found myself looking at a picture of Saint Gabriel going, that's not what he looks like. But, they played kind of fast and loose with some of that as well. Thoughts about some of the angel and demon lore?
Growing up, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Michelle.
Well, I was going to say that I grew up Catholic, Roman Catholic. I'm German, Irish Catholic, very common in my area where I'm from. And seeing this whole angels being human, even if they're not human, they have human caricatures. They behave a certain way. Gabriel is addicted to sex and makes a porno and whatnot. Just seeing that kind of stuff blew my mind. Also having Lucifer being, all right, sorry, I like Lucifer. I like Nick as Lucifer. I like Mark Pellegrino. And just seeing them in a much different light than I've never seen before in another show. Because, we were talking before we started, about Buffy and whatnot. They never actually went into the mythos of an established religion like Supernatural has.
Shout out to Ellis's Lucifer and the mythos of Lucifer that they've gone on to through there. But there's a whole lot of Neil Gaiman rolling around in that.
Yeah. So and so having the the Catholic side of my brain saying, hey, angels are this particular image, and then seeing them on screen as, I mean, as I've grown older, I'm like, I actually like the supernatural version of the angels and demons much better than what I was taught in Sunday school. It was just much more, I could swallow it a lot easier.
Well, when I first started watching it, and we got to the angels or dicks thing, that kid who went to catechism kind of rebelled a little bit. And then I thought about it, and I thought, can I think of a single time in the Bible when angels showed up to help somebody where they weren't specifically sent, where they did it on their own, or they wanted to go? No, usually they show up to, screw somebody up, smite people, level cities. But they don't show up on their own to do good works. This whole idea of having a guardian angel on your shoulder, that is in itself very much a urban legend. It's completely non-canonical from religious sources.
And I love the complexity of the way that they built those characters, because to draw from the super nerd corner over here, like Charlie, I've also played in a LARP for a long time, and I have played a non-human character in a LARP for more than 25 years. So I have spent a lot of time thinking about the way that non-humans would think and learning how to behave that way. And that's what I found so impressive about these, about the angel and demon characters that they had here. The really excellent actors that they have chosen for, the main influential angel and demon roles. You were able to, both with the demons, see their humanity peek through, and with the angels, see their utter alienness peek through. And those were really important, because humanizing the demons makes them more attractive and makes them, makes it more understanding as to why people would, mess around with that. And making the angels more alien and strange really speaks to the fact that they aren't trustworthy, and they aren't the angel on your shoulder like you think with the little wings and halo from your Christmas tree. And I really think they did an amazing job with that.
The demons almost seem to be the ones that almost identify more with the humans. Well, they were human at one point, and the angels weren't human at one point.
Yeah, and Michelle, that's that sticky wicket with the demons, where they seem more and more and more appealing, but it's also the same thing we all learned in CCP, where the devil and his and whatever demons are very charming. They're going to draw you down the road to evil, and then you're going to get there and you're not going to realize how you got there. So
road to perdition, good intention, kind of the second theme of the show, when you think of. Well, and I do think it's kind of funny, and I just had this conversation on Facebook, which gives you an idea of what sort of conversations I get into on Facebook, but it was all the idea of junkless angels. And somebody had pointed out that if angels are truly junkless, then why was there a prescription in the Bible about the sons of men and the sons of angels, cohabitating and creating the Nephilim? Somebody had to have some junk somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. That disproves that, but it's an interesting little road for Dean to go down. But as he gains maturity, you see that insult kind of stops.
Yeah. Elektra, how about you?
Well, my Bible stuff is not, sort of stops at the Old Testament, unfortunately. I grew up in a different tradition. Sorry guys.
That's perfectly okay. It all informs this. I think they kind of liberally stole from everybody.
That's an awesome analysis that I'd love to hear.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't talk a lot about angels. I can do the 10 Commandments thing a lot. But that's about as far as my Hebrew school went. Well, I can tell you about the laws of kashrut, but that's another talk.
Significantly more vengeful God, though.
Oh, very, very much so.
More vengeful.
Well,
sorry, I walked away from religion I don't know, when I went to college.
Yeah.
I'd rather walk.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the other things that comes into the show a lot, with the Enochian, and then of course the whole arc in that first, 5 seasons. Of course, the Enochian comes from the Book of Enoch, which is part of the Apocrypha, so not really one of the totally official books, but it's all laid out there. And what fascinated me, given my upbringing, which wasn't Catholic, but which was very much in the rapture is coming at any moment kind of Protestantism, I grew up on what was called dispensationalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this big illustrated coffee table kind of book that had all of the stages of the apocalypse and the 7 seals and Armageddon, and it was illustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And as a child, I thought this was fascinating because it had monsters on it and all these cool symbols. And I'm watching the show, having left this behind me 30 years in the dust, and I'm going, holy hell, they read the same books. This is, Charles Leland's dispensationalism. They have ripped this right off.
You're like, damn it, where did I have that book? Do I still have the book?
I had gotten rid of it when we cleaned out my dad's house.
That had to be so irking.
It's kind of a spiritual clean sweep, and I'm watching the show going, oh my gosh, somebody really did their homework on this.
Never throw away a reference book.
All of
Even if you live on them.
Yeah, there was so much, but that fascinated me. That and those were the Kripke years, so there was more continuity, and I think he kind of held people to the continuity. But
all of the Latin, Gail, there is very, very funny because, like Elektra had mentioned, Judaism, and you would think that they're hitting at Old Testament magics that they choose to use. They would choose either Hebrew or Aramaic or something, that's generally old and, would be a little more on the, on the logical end, but it's Latin, and that's got its root in pop culture being used as exorcisms and anti-demons and all the Catholicism and priests that are sopped into our horror movies over the years, have convinced us that Latin is what all the angels and demons speak, and that's how they can hear you. So that's always cracked me up.
Is that why it is? Okay.
I never thought of it that way. That's really cool.
Yeah, and we all hear it, and it makes sense because we've heard so much of it. I mean, even horror movie wise, everybody's seen The Exorcist. We've read tons of Stephen King stuff. Everybody's always had that image that's been created in popular culture of that priest that's going to fight against evil with his cross and his Latin prayers.
Well, that's another thing. Like Latin has just been almost, idolized within pop culture as being this powerful language.
Oh, the Romans.
And
it's much easier to write out in English characters.
Yeah.
And probably easier for the cast to pronounce.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to write out Hebrew and English characters.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Less familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, but Latin's an easy latch on. It's another point to them being able to easily convince their audience that it's just a half step outside of normal, because Latin doesn't sound particularly weird to us. And it sounds like what you would use to do magic or demonology or all that kind of stuff. So it adds to the overall believability of what you're doing.
Even Harry Dresden uses sort of a bastard form of Latin.
Yep. He uses a lot of words, and in the Harry Potter books, they use a lot of Latin, So we have come to think of Latin as being like the language of magic. It's certainly in, like, when you're watching like King Arthur stories and stuff like that, there's always some kind of creepy Latin going on in the background.
I had to laugh. I remember, seeing something about somebody who was protesting when the Harry Potter books were coming out that these books contained real spells that they were teaching children. And of course it was Latin. And I'm thinking, well, tell that to every med student who isn't levitating.
Right. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
I was trying to I was trying to go over my anatomy homework and I accidentally summoned a demon. Now what do I do?
But no, they
Sure,
did.
that was a movie, a bad horror movie. Yeah.
I've read a whole lot.
That was the Hollywood Babylon episode, right? Where they actually went to that one.
Yeah.
One where I love that because they used the sugar glass window, and I love those. We used to use them in our LARP to do breaking glass, and people were always freaked out by it because they were like, oh, "You broke glass." I'm like, "No, the next time it rains, there won't be any glass left here."
But now they have drawn on some of the Hebrew and some of the Middle Eastern mythology. The bad guys that they haven't come back to, and I'm kind of wondering if we'll see them again. The ones Asmodeus tried to get Jack to raise out of the hole in the ground, was it the Shadim? Shadim, yeah. That's one of those kind of obscure.
That is deep.
Yeah, that's really obscure. And then
they've had some very obscure vampires from some of the other traditions, some of the really weird ones.
Yeah.
You know, the vampires that the people that break in half, they've had a couple of those.
Yeah.
Because everybody has a vampire myth, and some of them are less humanoid than you would think.
Yeah.
Less human-like.
Exactly, Elektra, because there's the ones that don't just, in our tradition, it's vampires that feed off of blood, but in so many other traditions, it's vampires that feed off of your life energy or your dreams or your hopes or whatever. And, you know, it's very...
Well, one of them got Rufus. I don't remember what it was, one of the weird other vampires that got Rufus, I think.
Yeah.
One of the Japanese vampire, maybe?
The Japanese vampires are very strange. There's one that's kind of a floating brain stem that goes after pregnant women, and it's like, what were you smoking to come up with this? I mean, that's just so out there.
The one with the monster that feeds on the little children that where Dean was out playing the video game and left Sam alone in the room and all of that. That monster is very much that's a vampire type monster from another tradition. I
think it's Polish.
Yeah, they're all the same. And and the Leshy, that was another great one. They're all vampire adjacent monsters that feed on your life force instead of just eating your blood. And I mean, it's funny how much cleaner our kind of American Western choices there with the vampires. They want to suck your blood, whereas in a lot of old world European cultures, they don't want to suck your blood. They want to take your life away and your energy and your sanity and all those sorts of things. Your blood is just like tertiary. That's not even interesting.
We even got a kind of a nod to Lovecraft in the episode where they found that woman in the 1920s outfit in the bunker and the rift opened and Dean almost got kind of tentacled.
Yes. And we've had multiple Lovecrafts with that.
Well, and there was the crossover with Wizard of Oz too.
Yeah.
Because apparently Oz is a piece of the lore as well.
Yeah, they did the dinner where they had, when they were opening, before they opened Purgatory, and the dinner that the young lady was at the house, and then they found out that she was a creature that had come out of Purgatory because her son, and Dean went and talked to him in a rest home, and like he was the only survivor.
That was definitely a Lovecraftian reference.
I'm a huge Lovecraft fan. I acknowledge that everything about him is truly problematic, but the monsters were okay. And Cthulhu is, that was one really interesting way for them to nod to the Cthulhu mythos without like really going deep into it.
Well, they even got into, the legends and talking about modern legends, the whole episode with the Looney Tunes, Hunter Hiroshi,
so good,
where he put it together because he recognized the Looney Tune legends, and then really Scooby Natural. That show has been on for 50 years.
Right.
It's got its own mythos, and they respected it.
Yeah, I forgot how good the Looney Tune one. I always forget how good that one is until I watch it again.
I just watched that one last week. It is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's on my list of ones to watch when I've had a bad day and I just need something light, funny, and comforting.
Mhm.
You know, that's
Same.
on there.
Well, folks, I think we could, find more examples and talk about more things, and maybe we come back for Legends of Lore too. But we are actually at the end of our time. So thank you all so much for being with us tonight.
It was
Let's go around and let everybody know where to find you online, starting with Elektra.
Well, you can find me at untilmidnight.com, and it's been fun.
Amy?
You can find me on Facebook as Amy McNeil, and you can find me on LinkedIn as Amy Gardner McNeil, or on AO3 as the Lady Kira.
Very good. And Michelle?
You can find me on Twitter at preheatingprof.
And you can find me online as Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. Everything else is pretty much a version of those. And of course, we are at ConTinual, which you can find us on Facebook and soon on the web. So stay tuned for more supernatural fandom coming your way on ConTinual. See you online.